Evening.
Are we on YouTube?
Almost. 2 seconds to be on YouTube. I know. Well, we needed to wait until we had somebody to do the thing.
No, the actual loading, not the.
Which why we? Okay.
Is it Shiur's fault? No, Shiur's terrible.
No, it's not.
Can't do anything right.
Vodafone.
We're up to Daf Lamed Vav. Oh, I've got to write some notes. Okay. We're up to Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the top, and we'll continue with our halachas of matzah. Which kind of matzah one can be yotze with, and which one's not. You might have thought yotze adam b'dei chavoseh v'ma'aseh sheni b'Yerushalayim. Ma'aseh sheni went to Yerushalayim. So if you take produce of ma'aseh sheni and make matzahs in Yerushalayim, you might call it yotze. Tamadima lechem oini. Oini means literally, what does oini mean? Poor. But if you were to listen to the word without looking inside, oini can also mean loshon aninus, affliction, or more than that, something that a person, the mourning of a person who just lost a family member. Mashenecha ba'aninus, only something which you can eat when you're an oinen. It's going to be saglili. If you go to Shalim with your ma'aseh sheni produce and you make matzahs, you can't be yotze leil seder with them. Matzahs riba. So here, Rabbi Akiva Misaklili are actually arguing halacha l'maaseh. We're going to have a few arguments from Rabbi Akiva Misaklili. Sometimes they're only arguing on the source. Here, they're actually arguing in the halacha. According to Rabbi Akiva, you are allowed to use ma'aseh sheni. According to Rabbi Yossi, you're not allowed to use ma'aseh sheni. Now the Gemara tries to examine the pasuk, how it fits in according to both opinions. Why does it say lechem oini? You're not allowed to use a dough which has been kneaded with honey, oil, or wine. So according to Rabbi Akiva, oini is to teach you what? What's the word oini? And according to Rabbi Akiva, what does oini teach you? Very good. Oh. Says the Gemara, my time of Rabbi Akiva. Why is Rabbi Akiva reluctant to learn that of Yossi Aglili? Answer more, miksiv lechem oini, oniksiv. In the Torah, sometimes whenever the Torah wants to write with a cholam, with a oi, usually puts a vav. So if the Torah really meant to say lechem oini, it would say ayin and vav non yod. Instead, the Torah does it without a vav, but we read it oini because there's a cholam there on the ayin. So therefore, lechem oini, if you read it without knowing the vowels, you would read it lechem oni, not lechem oini. And if you can't dash an aninus, you seem puzzled. We have this in actually in Sukkah, kapois to moim. How many loving did you shake this year? Now, kapois is lashon yochid or lashon rabim? Rabim, so why do you only shake one? Kapas, very good. What does that mean? Because in the Torah it's written without a vav. So even though we actually read it kapois, but we read it out. Okay.
Is that Rabbi Akiva all the time?
Not always, but this not always. You're right. Then also says what? Says the Gemara. So it says oni ksif. It says it without the vav. Rabbi Yossi Aglili mi koinon oni. Oni koinon. We read it oni. And the first already explained that there's a famous machlekes yesh eim lemikvah yesh eim lemesoros, meaning that we have 2 traditions. One is how the Torah was spelt, and one is how the Torah is read. So the question is, which one is more important? Which one do we take more into consideration? Rabbi Akiva says we take consideration the letters. The mikvah, not the mesoros. Therefore, how you read it. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva, hide korinon bei oini kedeshmor. Domashmor lechem oini lechem sheinin alav dvam. How they matzah, you're supposed to say many things. When you say the Haggadah, when you say the Halom, you're supposed to say it in front of the matzah. That's why if you look in the Haggadah, many times it tells you open the matzahs, reveal the matzahs. I saw Rasha's Sefer very nicely that, let's say for argument's sake, you forgot to put the matzahs on the table. I have a reason. And it comes to Motzi matzah. Can you be yotze with matzah, which you never said on it anything? The answer is yes. Oh, the Torah says, lechem oini, lechem shein ozvam ha'be. It's only a mitzvah, an extra mitzvah. You can't be yotze without. So now comes out Moshe. According to Rabbi Akiva, what do we learn from lechem oini? 2 things. Lechem shein ozvam ha'be, that you should say the Hallel and Haggadah on it. And furthermore, that it has to be poor man's bread. You can't use bread which has got oil, wine, or honey. According to Rabbi Yosef Glili, we learn one thing. What do we learn from it? Very good. Oh. Says the Gemara, a dough which is kneaded with wine, oil, and honey is no good. But Tanya, till now we'll be discussing what is the problem. Why should there be a problem putting honey into your dough? Why should... Oh, it's not a poor man's bread. But there's another problem. What's another? Even the stronger, you're right. That's how you would have said doesn't go chametz, but here the Gemara suggests maybe it comes chametz quicker.
Is this something talking about the first day?
Oh, you've skipped already 10 lines and told me the answer more. But you're right. The Vaila, let's work it out. No, it's good. It's good. Like it. Oh, that's right. Till now we'll be discussing lechem oini as bread which is poor man, therefore you can't use honey or oil because it's not poor man's bread. But now we're discussing a different problem, is the fact that oil and honey can make things become chametz quicker. And Ben straight away said, that's you talked about yesterday, you told me that it doesn't become chametz at all, and today it makes a chametz quicker. So Rashi asks the question. So that is what we mentioned yesterday, big machlekes, Meditatus and Rashi. Rashi understands that it becomes quicker chametz midrabanon, but it never becomes chametz deraisa, which is very hard to grasp. It means like this: regarding a lower level chametz enoigsha, which is not a good chametz, not a proper chametz, that happens very quickly. But to become real chametz deraisa, that takes time. That never happens. Oh, the Rambam adds that if you add water, then water with fruit juices, it comes chametz very, very quick. So the Rambam will explain the next following Gemara as to where you added water and you added oil. I don't go back and forth in the machlekes. We're going to explain. The next brisa takes on to consideration that honey and oil and these things make chametz happen much, much quicker. Now we're going to have a double machlekes. One machlekes, I just say it out, something easier. Whether 3 opinions about wine, oil, and honey. We'll use always wine as an example. Either it is asa completely, or it is mutter completely, or it is asa lechatchila and mutter b'diavad. 3 opinions regarding this wine, oil, and honey. Again, either it's no good, not lechatchila, no b'diavad, or it's fine, even lechatchila, or lechatchila, don't use it b'diavad, it's okay. And then we have another machlokes. According to the Mandama, that it's no good, that is when you put it in the dough. Many times, if you make a bread, a challah, what you do, you smear the challah afterwards, you egg it. And what happens if you egg your matzahs with wine? Is that as bad as putting wine into the dough or not? So that's only a machlokes according to the Mandama that it's no good at all. According to the Mandama that it's no good at all, what would you say about, egging is the wrong word, about glazing it? Glazing it. So that's another machlekes. It's got 2 machlekes. Machlekes number 1, 3 opinions by using wine in the dough. What are the 3 shittahs? Either no good at all, absolutely fine, or not good. But rather it's no good, we have another machlekes, and we'll see the Beis inside. So according to Rabbi Akiva, we just said that you're not allowed to use wine, oil, and honey. So we would expect Rabbi Akiva in this following Beis to take the opinion that it's no good. And we will see that Rabbi Akiva actually takes the opinion that's fine. So that's a contradiction to Rabbi Akiva. Again, Akiva said before it's no good. Why is it no good? Because it's not lechem oni. It's not a poor man's bread. And in the following Beis, he takes the opinion that it doesn't create chametz and that it's fine. So that's a contradiction of Akiva. So what's the answer, by the way? What's the answer? You should say it now. What's the answer? Again, Moshe, you should say the answer. You jumped at it a minute ago. I thought you'd happy it. It depends if it's the first night or other nights. That means Rabbi Akiva holds it is true that it doesn't become chametz. And therefore, most of Pesach, it is absolutely fine to have wine matzah, oil matzah, or honey matzah. The problem is that first night Seder is a mitzvah to eat lechem oini, a poor man's bread, and that's not a poor man's bread. That's all the Gemara says. It's very straightforward. You can work that yourself. It's fine to eat the first day, but you won't have your mitzvah. You have to eat something else for your mitzvah. Very good. You're right. I mean, Seder night, you could end up eating honey matzahs for the first hour, and then eat 1 bit of matzah, which is not honey matzah, which is proper matzah. It says, and if you did, burn it immediately. Gamliel holds it absolutely no good. He holds that what? It is chametz. You're allowed to eat it, but not lechatchila. Yochid means you can eat it, but you shouldn't have done it. I once spent a Shabbos by Rabbi Eliezer of Yisroel, meaning Pesach there. And the main members of Rabbi Akiva were Rabbi Eliezer of Yisroel, by the way. But last year, I made them a matzah with wine, oil, and honey. So you see that Rabbi Akiva holds it's absolutely fine because he did it. Even though according to you, you're not allowed to make katfin, you're allowed to glaze it. Also, the Tanakhama, according to the Tanakhama, says it's no good. Nevertheless, glazing is okay. If you'd be allowed to knead it, you'd be allowed to glaze it. That those who say they're not allowed to knead it, they're not allowed to glaze in it. So according to the man, they're not allowed to knead it, you're not even allowed to glaze it either with honey. Everybody agrees not allowed to use warm water. You're not allowed to use warm water. Why can't you use warm water for your matzah baking? Right, it's very quick. So what do we do to make sure that our matzah remains cold? The water is cold. That's what you could do. Use ice cold water, or even better, you spring water. Ma'am shalonu. You take the water at the end of the day, because the Gemara tells us that the sun, when it sets at night, heats up the sea because the sun goes down into the sea. So all the waters in the seas and the stream get very warm. So you draw the water, we'll see, just before Nacht, and then that way the water stays out of the sea or the rivers during the night, and then use it the next day. But mostly you have to use cold water. And in fact, if you look carefully in Mechaber, you have to cover the water and put it in the room which has no windows, that it shouldn't get any sunlight. So the mice, in England, we don't think about the sunlight so much, but if you put it outside, it'll probably be colder. Oh, says the Gemara like this, says the Kasha. But Akiva before held the opinion that using honey is fine. It's no good because it's not lechem oini. And over here it says it's fine because it doesn't rise. Le kasha. This is about the first day of Pesach. This is the rest of Pesach. The Yom Tov Sheni, Rashi explains Lav Dafka. It means the first night of Seder or the rest of Pesach. Don't say to his sons, Yomi Kama, the first day of Pesach, don't make my matzahs with milk. He asked them not to add milk to the matzahs the first night Seder. But after the first night, you can add milk to my matzahs.
Maybe he said that the reason you want to have is the meat.
You have to have milk, and then after it's more, and then after it's your meat.
Then you have to have matzah.
You could have more in between. So in Maaseh, he said, don't use milk the first night. Afterwards, use it. What was the cheshbon? Because the first night he wanted lechem oini, and poor people can't afford milk. After that, he didn't care because he held it doesn't rise. You're never allowed to make a dough with milk. You're never allowed to have a dough with milk. Why are you never allowed to have a dough with milk? Why can't you have milk bread? Because you might come to eat with meat. So the Gemara says, we have to change Rabbi Shua. Don't use honey. You can use honey. So the first night he said to them, don't use honey. The rest of Pesach you use honey. By the way, you see it from a lot of places. I had no problem with rocking, by the way. I know some people are machmir about it. They'll get Gemara after Gemara. They used milk, they used honey. They had previously other... They were Chassidish. It's funny because Moshe video came down from our snow with a strimal. You didn't see on the pictures? Yes, curly fish. But the brothers never recognized it. Kai, I'm sorry.
No, but I'm saying they had very different... The rock gave a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
about their matzahs and
was thick.
Why the Indian problem. Their matzahs were very, very different though. They were thicker.
Okay. You see,
that's when you get the kefir and more of a
Vibo said another answer. Really, he talks about milk. Like the eye of an ox is promoted. Also, when Yisroel was talking about the eye of an ox. So Rashi says the eye of an ox is very small. So if you're allowed to bake milky bread if it's a small amount. Why? Because you won't forget. You'll finish it in one meal and then you won't forget that it's milky. Oh, that's what Rashi says. Look, Rashi says, you eat it straight away. Says Rashi, you won't forget. But as you pointed out correctly, the Ran explains that Ke'en doesn't mean a small amount. It means a strange shape. The eye of an ox is like a hexagon, what's it called? Like a diamond shape. So therefore, that shape, people recognize it instantly. That's a different shaped bread, and therefore that you're allowed to make it milky. So we're finished now. So again, if somebody said to you, are you allowed to eat Ma'aser Sheni matzahs? Mutter also. Good. You're allowed to use matzahs made out of honey, oil, or milk.
Depends on what
Oh,
night.
First night Pesach, not rest of Pesach. The shovin sheinosh neisa v'poishin. You're not allowed to knead it with warm water. All the menachas had to be matzah. There was only one mincha that was brought that was chametz. Anybody know which mincha was brought as chametz?
On Pesach.
No, not on Pesach. Ever, the whole year round, the Kohanim only ate matzah. Do you know they only ate matzahs the whole year round, Kohanim? Except for one time a year they would eat chametz. The shtei lechem on Shavuos. So, Fedig more, how can you say you can't use warm water because it rises? But the minchas also mustn't come rise. But it says, Kol ha-manochas neloishes b'poishin u'mishtamin shleich metzu. You just have to be very careful, they shouldn't come chametz. And says the Gemara, how can you compare? Mamu bezvizin, Yomi shein zvizin. How can you compare? Kohanim zvizin, they make sure to do the job properly. So they'll make sure they won't become chametz. But every person in the world who does matzah in his own private bakery, he might not. So therefore, with the person's private bakery, more machri. We're going to learn about letisa a number of times. Letisa basically was soaking the grain to take off the bran. Right? Soaking the grain to take off the bran. Now that's forbidden to do with matzah. Why? Because if you soak the grain, it might become chametz long before you ever get around to baking it. But even by menachas, we didn't allow it. Says the Gemara, you're not allowed to soak it to take off the bran. How can you say that Kohanim was vizim if they're so zois? Let's soak the grain to take off. Answers the Gemara. Lisha, the kneading bezvizin isa. That happened with the Kohanim. Letisa, leisa bezvizin. But the soaking, the letisa never happened bezvizin. When did you prepare the grain? Before you came to Beis Hamikdash, you bring to Beis Hamikdash a bag of flour. So if you did it outside the Beis Hamikdash at home, and you live there, say in Bnei Brak, and then you prepared the flour, and you brought it to Yerushalayim, and then the man is meant to be chometz. But the kneading itself, that happened in the Beis Hamikdash with Kohanim. If that happened with Kohanim, so therefore there's reason why not. Is that so? Velisha b'isa b'zvizin, did the kneading happen by Kohanim? And the pasuk says, "V'komatz the kohen mikmitza ve'elech mitzvas korona." The kohen's job was only from the time of kmitza. Limit adetzika ubelila sheksher b'chol adam. So we see that actually the Kohanim didn't get involved until the kmitza. So the Yisroel himself would do the kneading and the pouring of the oil and everything else. And then finally, the Kohen would come and make a kmitza, and afterwards he would put on the Mizbeach and do the avodas which were involved. He had to put the kmitza into a keli, carry the keli to the Mizbeach and put it on the Mizbeach. But that was only from kmitza. So how can you say that the kneading was okay? Because Kohanim was reason did it. And they'll make sure it will become chametz. But here we're talking about kneading with warm water. And who does the kneading? A Yisroel. A Yisroel is not Zoris. Answers the Gemara, no. At the end of the day, even though the Kohanim themselves didn't do it, it was under the jurisdiction of the Kohanim. You did it in the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore the Kohanim would make sure that you did it correctly. Says the Gemara like this: Lisha, nay, the Zvizin leisa, that the Zvizin didn't do it, but Mokim Zvizin isa. It happened in the Zoris place. Means you're allowed to do it by Yisroel, but not outside the Azor. So where did you do the kneading? In the Azor. If you did it in the Azor, the Kohanim would watch and then make sure. But the soaking of the bran, of the grain, when did that happen? They didn't happen not with Kohanim and not in the place of the Beis Hamikdash. You did it at home. It says, well, the Tanya they did soak the grain to take off the bran. But what they would do is they would pile up the grain after they soaked it to let it drip dry so that it shouldn't become chametz. So they would do it like on racks, so that way they'll make sure it drip dry quickly. So you see that minchas ha'omer they did allow it. That's what tzibur shani. The minchas ha'omer was the only mincha which was brought. The whole stage was done by tzibur. Even the harvesting they did by tzibur. The basin themselves would harvest it. They would go outside and they'd say, "Well, magos if you ever learned it." They would do a whole performance. So since it was done completely in the tzibur, so therefore it was permitted to do it. Okay. So if somebody says you can make matzahs with warm water.
No.
So when can you? What you can't?
Just by the Kohanim.
Just by mincha. Just by mincha. When they're even allowed to soak the grain, it's only by the omer. Okay. Now, till now we talked about ma'aser sheni. Now we're going to talk about bikurim. Can you use bikurim for your matzahs? What happened was I went into my field. I saw wheat growing. I put a red ribbon around it. Took the wheat all the way to Yerushalayim. And now I want to make out of it matzahs. Obviously, only a kohen can eat bikurim. So we're talking about a kohen wishing to eat bikurim matzahs. Talmud Lema, b'chol moshvei seichem teichlu matzahs. You should eat matzahs everywhere. Matzah necheles b'chol moshvei seichem. Matzah which is eaten everywhere. Yotzu bikurim shenechol b'chol moshvei seichem. And Yerushalayim to Beis Saklili. Says the Beis Saklili, how can you use bikurim for matzahs? Where do you eat bikurim? Only in Yerushalayim. And the Torah says b'chol moshvei seichem teichlu matzahs. The simple translation of the pasuk is you have to eat matzahs wherever you live. But you could also explain the pasuk that the matzahs have to be able to be eaten wherever you live. And these matzahs can't be eaten wherever you live. So therefore it's no good.
They can be to any
He can't take it outside Yerushalayim.
Sorry?
The Kohen can't take it outside Yerushalayim. Kohen's allowed to eat bikurim, but only in Yerushalayim. Rabbi Kiva, matzah or mo, the Torah tells us to eat matzah, mo, puts a hekesh together. Ma mo is in the bikurim, just like mo is not bikurim, because mo has to be something bitter. Af matzah she'ina bikurim. So again, here Rabbi Akiva is not arguing with Beis Saklili. In fact, Begad agrees with him. So if somebody would say to you bikurim, we're allowed to use matzahs of bikurim, everybody would agree not. According to Rabbi Saklili, because you can't eat outside Yerushalayim. According to Rabbi Akiva, because since the Torah says matzah or mo, it has to be the same species. There's a fascinating Tosfos that mo actually only has to be something bitter. Now, do you know anything which is bitter? What's bitter? Horseradish. Anything else you know bitter? You know from the story of Noach when he sent out the bird, humans and the Yomi came back with a ale zayis befir. What did the bird say to Noach? Better I should eat from an olive tree, which is bitter from the hands of Hashem, than to eat from you, have sweet. So why can't you use olives for more? Maybe you can. If you can use more olives, if that's the case, the kasha is, what's Rabbi Akiva saying? That you can't use bikurim for your matzah. Why not? Because matzah and moil compared. But who told you? Maybe moil and matzah moil compared. They're both from bikurim. Moil is from bikurim, and says matzah from bikurim. Says Tosfos that two answers. First of all, he says that the tree is bitter, not the actual olive. The leaf of an olive tree is very bitter, but not the actual olive. The Chazal tells Parashas Beshalach that Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu a tree to throw into the water to make it sweet. It's about an olive tree. Furthermore, he says we will learn later that you can't use fruit for more. It has to be a vegetable. So the Vaisa, you can't have more out of bikurim. So the more now says if you make a hekesh from matzah to more, and you say just like more is not bikurim, matzah can't be bikurim. So let's make a hekesh the other way around. If more can never be bikurim and it can't be something that could bring bikurim. Af matzah she'in mina b'koim. Also, matzah shouldn't be mina b'koim, and therefore says God daf of lam vav on base top of the page. Oitzi chitin v'sarivin. I'll exclude wheat and barley. She'esh mina b'koim. Maybe you're not allowed to use wheat and barley. So what would you have to use for your matzahs? Spelt or vayot. Talmud leima matzahs vibo. Says well, matzahs vibo. I feel b'koim nami. Even b'koim as well. And if that's the case, go back to square one. You got matzahs includes, and the hekesh of matzah more comes to exclude. So maybe it's coming to include everything. So Gemara says, Hoda be Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva changed his mind. So the reality is, Rabbi Akiva actually agrees with you exactly that what? That you're not allowed to use bikurim for your matzahs. How do we know? Why? How do you know? The Tanya. You might thought person can be used for bikurim. Matzah nechenes b'chol mishvoy, so bikurim shenechol b'chol mishvoy said b'Yerushalayim. Only matzah are not only matzah can be eaten everywhere. Bikurim can't be eaten everywhere, so therefore you can't use bikurim for your matzahs. Yochel shani moitzaf ma'aser sheni. With that logic, we should exclude ma'aser sheni as well. Ma'aser sheni can only be eaten in Yerushalayim, and therefore ma'aser sheni should also be excluded, and you should be able to use ma'aser sheni for matzahs. Talmud Leima, what? That's the one I was going to see in a minute. But by the way, who holds a ma'aser sheni you can use for matzahs? Rabbi Akiva. Yisroel says you can't. So this brisa that's trying to say that ma'aser sheni is okay, who's saying this brisa? Must be Rabbi Akiva. And nevertheless, he's using the drasha b'chol mishvoy seichem. So we see that Rabbi Akiva himself was chayzer that he does without the drasha b'chol mishvoy seichem. So God says, Yochel shani moitzaf ma'aser sheni. Maybe I'll also exclude ma'aser sheni. Tamunim matzahs sviva matzahs come to include. What makes you include ma'aser sheni and to exclude bikurim? Ma'avani ma'aser sheni shesh lo yetzer b'chol mishavos k'du abeleza. Ma'aser sheni theoretically you could eat it outside Yerushalayim. Bikurim you can never eat it outside Yerushalayim. Since Ma'aser Sheni, there's a possibility of eating outside Yerushalayim, so therefore it's included in B'chol Shvei. Bikurim can never. How? Normally the halacha is like this, that you take Ma'aser Sheni to Yerushalayim. If it's too far to carry, what do? You redeem it on money. You're only allowed to redeem it outside Yerushalayim. Once you came to Yerushalayim, it was called Kelitas Mechitzas. The Mechitzas grabbed the fruit, and now you're not allowed to redeem it. Yeah, if you go out, you can. But in Yerushalayim, you can't redeem it. Actually, that I'm not so sure about. If you already came in, I'm not sure. It was Ma'aser says Rabbi Eliezer, but now the Ma'aser Sheni Shenitmo. What happens if you became Tommy? Now that we became Tommy, so therefore it's not going to Kedushas Ma'aser Sheni anymore. So therefore, you're allowed to eat it everywhere and redeem it. The simple translation word say so means what? You're not able to carry it. Seis can also mean to eat it. That's that Yosef gave them portions of food. Sorry, not Vayigash. Is it Vayigash? Is it no? It is indicates that he gave them portions of food. So we see the masses again. So the Torah says, there's two meanings. You can't carry it, you can't eat it. So therefore, if it comes to Tom and Yerushalayim, and therefore you can't eat it, therefore you're allowed to redeem it. So it comes out that it comes out that by Seshedi there is a possibility to eat it outside Yerushalayim. Mashiach Bikurim, you can never eat it outside Yerushalayim. Bikurim that becomes Tommy, what's the halacha? You burn it. What do you say? You burn it. Now he said you burn it. You can't use it. By Seshedi, if it comes to Tommy, you can redeem it and eat it outside Yerushalayim, but Bikurim you can't. So therefore, the Torah says B'chol Shvei is coming to just exclude Bikurim the Ma'aser Sheni. Man, Shema stayed on Ma'aser Sheni. Nofik Pei. Who's the man that says he'll allowed to use Ma'aser Sheni? Rabbi Akiva. So that means like this. When it comes to Ma'aser Sheni, we have a machlek so we keep a Yisrael. Rabbi Yisrael says lechem oini, something that can be eaten by ninus. Ma'aser Sheni can't be eaten by ninus, therefore you can't eat matzahs and Ma'aser Sheni. Rabbi Akiva says lechem oini just means a poor man's bread, don't add in it oil, honey, etc. But you can use Ma'aser Sheni. When it comes to Bikurim, he says, so therefore everybody agrees you can't use Bikurim for your matzahs. So here's the Gemara of Yosef Aglili that he says that Bikurim can't be eaten, matzahs can't be eaten, Bikurim can't be used for matzahs. Bikurim, the Torah says you should eat it for some machta v'cholat toiv, you should eat it at a time of simcha. A person who's an oinen is obviously not besimcha. If he's not besimcha, so he can't eat bikurim. So therefore, why does he have to have a whole new drasha by bikurim? According to Rabbi Akiva, we understand, because he didn't hold the drasha of lechem oini. So since he didn't hold the drasha of lechem oini, that you can eat it by ninus, mashik ma'ashin you can't, therefore ma'ashin you can't use for matzahs. He holds ma'ashin you can use for matzahs. So therefore, he has to come on to bikurim b'chol meshv'seichem. According to Rabbi Yisrael, that he dashes lechem oini, that only something that can be eaten by ninus you can be yoytze your matzah. So then why do you need a pasuk by Bikurim, a special pasuk? You should learn it from the same place they learned Ma'aser Sheni. And it's more Savalek Rab Shimon, the Tanya Bikurim Asum Le'oinen, Rab Shimon Matir. There's machlokes whether an oinen is allowed to eat Bikurim. Rab Shimon says it's mutter. So Rabbi Yisrael clearly could learn it from the pasuk of Lechem Oini, not to use your matzahs for Bikurim. Because he holds that an oinen is allowed to eat bikurim. An oinen is not allowed to eat Ma'aser Sheni, but he is allowed to eat bikurim. What's the svor of the chachamim that you're not allowed to eat bikurim when a person's an oinen? The pasuk there says a list of things they're not allowed to eat outside Yerushalayim. You're not allowed to eat Ma'aser Tegonecho, Tivoishcho, Yisorecho, Nedorecho, Tumas Yodcho. It says a long list of things they're not allowed to eat outside Yerushalayim. So that's a hekesh. So we compare everything in the pasuk to each other. And the pasuk says, we explain Tumas Yodcho Bikurim. The Iskash Bikurim Lamaisa. So the pasuk mentions Bikurim and Maisa in the same breath. Ma Maisa Asaloinen, Af Bikurim Asaloinen. So we learn from there that Maisa is also to learn like Bikurim. So if it comes out according to the, Bikurim is also to learn like Maisa. So if it comes out according to the Chachamim, that an oinen is not allowed to eat bikurim. Rab Shimon, Chovim or kunuach one, the Torah calls it Tumah Ketumah. Ma Tumah Teres Loinen, Apikon Mutar Loinen. Just like Tumah is Mutar for Loinen, also Bikon Mutar for Loinen. So again, let's go slowly. We have Machlikas Tanoim as to whether an Oinen is allowed to eat Bikon. Shittas of Shimon is that he is allowed to, Shittas Chomim is not allowed to. The Chomim Lenetar from the fact that the Torah mentions Tumah Siotcha together with Maisa, to make a hekesh for Maisa Tumah Siotcha. Rav Shimon learns it from the fact that the Torah calls Bikun Truma, and an Oinen is allowed to eat Truma. How do we know that an Oinen is allowed to eat Truma? It's the Gemara in Yevamos. The Gemara says, V'chol zol lo yichal kodesh, that Yisroel is not allowed to eat Truma. The Torah says it twice in Parashas Emor, very shortly one after the next. Yisroel is not allowed to eat Truma. Yisroel is not allowed to eat Truma. And then we ask the question, what's going on? Why do you have to twice? And more darshans, zol somar telechov v'lo yaninus. That Truma is only forbidden to a Zoh, but not to an Oinen, which is quite strange in the sense that usually Truma is more Chomel than Ma'aser Sheni, but regarding Aninus, it's more Kulatik. And Ma'aser Sheni is forbidden by an Oinen, and Truma is permitted by an Oinen. It's one of the exceptions where we see Truma is more Kulatik than Ma'aser Sheni. It's one of in God B'Chayik, Yeshchime b'Ma'aser v'Truma. One of the Chumas of Ma'aser Sheni is that you're not allowed to eat by Aninus. So therefore, comes out the Machlokas Chumim and Shimon when an Oinen is allowed to eat B'Kol. Rav Yossi held like with Shimon that an Oinen is allowed to eat Bikun. So therefore he couldn't dash and lechem Oini, only matzah that can be eaten by an Oinen afuke Truma. It's afuke Bikun. Because he held that Bikun is allowed to be eaten by Ninus. So therefore he was left with a new drasha of B'chol Moshe Seichem that has to be able to be eaten everywhere, and Bikun can't be eaten everywhere, and that's why Rav Yossi Glili had to come up with a new drasha. Rav Shimon Nei Dehekesh Leslie. Even if he doesn't hold of the hekesh of Truma Siotcha and Ma'aser Sheni, Simcha b'Yemik Michtav Ksiva bu. The Torah actually says the word Simcha by Bikoim. Dichsiva Samachta b'Cholatoi. Answers the Gemara, Ahu that Lisman Simcha Udasa. It's not coming to tell you that you have to be happy when you eat Bikoim. It can be sad, but it has to be brought at the time of Simcha. It's not Ma'aser Sadachag from Shavuos till Sukkos, maybe Vekera, you bring and you say the Pesukim Aram Yovedovi. But Me'achag Vad Chanukah, from Sukkos till Chanukah, maybe you can bring Me'nekera, you don't say the Pesukim, because it doesn't, it's not the time of Simcha, because Simcha is at the time when you see all the harvest coming into your house. So therefore you bring it you only maybe Vekera from Shavuos to Sukkos, and from Sukkos to Chanukah, you bring what you don't say. And after Chanukah, you don't even bring. Because the Pasuk says, Asher Tovi me'al tzecha, only while there is still produce in your land. When there's no produce in your land, you don't bring any more at all Bikorim. So therefore, before Shavuos, you also don't bring. Why don't you bring Bikorim before Shavuos? Anybody know? Where do we still say it? What? Because of the fact that you can't bring Bikorim before Shavuos, because the Shtei Alechem of Shavuos is the first produce you bring on the Mizbeach from the new wheat. And until then, you can't bring Bikurim. Okay. Tanu Rabbanon, Lechem Oini. We hear with Dashi Lechem Oini, poor man's bread. Brat lecholut. Cholut is bread which has been, after it's like bagels, whether they're heated in hot water, boiled. V'la shisha, and to a very, very big matzah, kishmaka, a loaf of matzah, you're not allowed to, because not lechem only. You might have thought the person should not be yotza unless he uses pas hadro. Pas hadro is bran bread. You might have thought it's no good. There's machlokas. How does the word hadro mean bran bread? Rashi says hadro means hodo, it's beauty. So pas hadro means bread that all the beauty has been taken away from it. All the fine flour has been taken away from it. So therefore, it's called pas hadro. The Ran says, on the contrary, because then it should be called pas she'ein hadro. He says it's like ola ba'osa, that bran bread is particularly unpleasant. So we call it glorified bread as a euphemism.
It's more healthy though, officially.
I know nowadays it's more healthy. Yes, nowadays we know that's healthier. But the fact is, it doesn't have the glory of the. If you wanted to serve a king, you won't bring him a bowl of all bran. You'd give him something better. Is it that? Oh, that's his matzah. Even the matzahs of Shlomo Melech. Says, well, my mashbedai ashisha lishna chashivusa. How do we know that ashisha is an important piece of bread? Pasuk there is describing after Shlomo Melech built the Beis Hamikdash, and he finished being Mekadesh it. When was that? When did Moshe Shlomo Melech finish being Mekadesh the Beis Hamikdash? Sukkot, yes. 24th of Tishri. They didn't fast at Yom Kippur because they went and waited through. No, 40. Erev Sukkot, the 14th. They went from Rosh Hashanah till the 14th Sukkot to celebrate it. So at the end of it, he gave everybody a portion. To every yid, to every person. One loaf of bread. The more will explain it. Ashpo means echad b'shisha b'par. He gave every yid a sixth of a cow. Ashisha echad b'shisha b'ephah. A sixth of an ephah. Okay, so how much is an ephah? How much is the size of an ephah? I actually try to memorize before the shiur. Ephah is, that's right, 432 eggs. So a sixth of an ephah is 72 eggs. So he gave everybody a loaf of bread the size of 42 eggs. That's right, these tish chalas. That's a big 42 for every yid. The pliga de shmor dom hashmor ashisha gal but the chamo was a barrel of wine. Those who love barrels of wine, drinking of wine. Okay, so let's get just clear a little bit. We have a machlokas what Rav Shlomo Melech gave out. Either gave everybody a barrel of wine, a sixth of a cow, and a sixth of an ephah of bread. Alternatively, he gave everybody a loaf of bread, a sixth of an ephah measure of dough besides, and a sixth of a cow. Either way, we see that the word ashisha is referring to a particularly glamorous or grand piece of bread, and therefore lavish, and that is also to use for matzah. Cholot is something which is scalded. So this discusses a little bit what is scalded, but Beis it does depend a bit on the more later. We'll leave it to them. Beis, because for example, donuts. What would you say? Donuts. Donuts are fried. That would be cholot, right? Because they are not baked in the oven. Shaila is, could you use matzahs which are cooked? We'll see. Okay, tell me Ein ofen afas offer beyond to Pesach Tivei B'Shamai. You're not allowed to make thick bread on Pesach Tivei B'Shamai. Ubesir matir. There are two explanations we'll go through both as to why can't you make thick matzah. Anybody want to say why can't make thick matzah? What? Because it'll come chametz. Not that it looks like chametz, it will become chametz. It's very hard to keep it not chametz. Don't do so thick. That's what another shaila is. There's a halacha tirchi yasera. You're not allowed to bake on Yom Tov except for something that you want on Yom Tov. You make it such a massive dough, you're not going to be able to eat it all. You're always going to keep it for afterwards. So we'll say, we'll go through a little bit. Camel pass over. I want to get to the Torah Abon on 4 lines from the thing because it's a longer daf. The camel pass over. It's a tefach. The lechem aponim was a tefach. How do you know lechem aponim was a tefach? Because the Torah calls it lechem aponim, bread that has a face. A face is never less than a tefach. A human being's face is never narrower than a tefach. So therefore, the lechem aponim was the thickness of a tefach thick. Basket of Yosef, Imam Bezvizin, they allowed the lechem aponim to a tefach thick. Why? Because the Kohanim baked it. Yomi b'sheinon zvizin. Oh, we're going to allow a Yisroel at home baking matzahs to make a tefach thick matzah. How can you compare? Here it's a tefach thick because the Kohen needs to do it fast, but Yisroel. If they say it's by dough which they worked very hard, would they say the same halacha by a dough which has been worked so hard? In the Mishkan, Beis Hamikdash, they would work with the dough very, very hard. Every dough, they would kick it 500 times and bang it 300 times, 800 times of kneading it. Can you imagine? In order that it should be properly kneaded. Be'ita 500 and shifa, rubbing it 300 times. Therefore, it comes out that the dough in the Beis Hamikdash was worked on very strongly. How can you compare that to a normal person's dough? Continues the Mishnah of Yosef. Imam Ubeitzim Yavation, you know, Ubeitzim Lachim, the Beis Hamikdash, they only use the driest wood. Which wood would they use in the Beis Hamikdash? Yeah. Yeah, but how to make sure the wood was very, very dry, but even better, they only cut wood in the summer. By the 15th of Av, they stopped cutting wood, and then they would store it because they wanted only the driest wood. So you can't compare to our, and the Gemara carries on. The oven in the Beis Hamikdash was extremely, extremely hot. Why? First of all, they would keep it on all the time. Shake it all first. So finally, what? Cut down. The Beis Hamikdash only use a metal oven, and metal oven is much hotter than earthenware oven. Meaning, how can you say that just because the Beis Hamikdash they did the lechem upon the tefach? I'm allowed to make a matzah tefach. How can you compare? There's a variety of difference. There's vizim. The wood was dry. The oven was hot. The oven was metal, and the dough was kneaded a very lot. You can't compare. So the Gemara says, "Omar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Sheili says Rabbi asked my Rabbi beyichud clearly umani, and who was it? Rav Ikadomi Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Omar Rav Sheili says Rabbi beyichud. I asked Rabbi clearly umani Rabbeinu Hakadosh. My Passover pas meruba, a lot of dough. My Koli Passover should have nefisha belisha because there's a lot of kneading when it's thick. They would call a lot of dough thick dough. If the problem now, we're changing the problem because of chametz, and we're saying everybody agrees you're not allowed to make it a tefach thick, why not? Because you can't compare it to Beis Hamikdash. So if that's the case, so what's the heter? So what's that nice? The problem is because of Tircha Yisrael. So why would Beis Shammai talking about Pesach? Tircha Yisrael is also on Shavuos and Sukkot as well. Says what enochenami. By Talab Yom Tov Pesach koi. You have it to by Yom Tov Pesach. So he talks about the Yom Tov Pesach when you're doing a very big dough. Tani nami ochi b'sham oim oifen pass over by Yom Tov or b'sil matirin. So we've got machlekes b'sham and b'sil, nothing to do with Pesach. Machlekes b'sham and b'sil is to do with what? Tircha Yisrael on Yom Tov. B'sham say not allowed to make a big dough. B'sil say allowed to. Why do we still say allowed to make a big dough? Does anybody know? Oh, but why is it permitted? Oh, you're doing a tircha and it's anyway. So what? You're making a bigger dough?
Yeah, but in case guests like
that's you're right. Theoretically, you'd be right. What if you're doing it close to the end of Shabbos? There's no chance of guests coming. The answer is because it is bakes better when you fill up the oven, and therefore you're allowed to. But you're not allowed to. Says the top taste sometimes that taste talks about it. You're not allowed to fill up the oven twice. You're only allowed to make enough dough that you can fill up the oven once. But if it requires twice filling up the oven, then it's forbidden. It's only if the oven can be filled once. And this is important to halacha. Let's say, for example, Yom Tov afternoon, you want to put on the kettle. Like you don't have let's say you have a gas thing, you want to have seen it happening. It's very big technology, so it fills up. You're allowed to fill up as much as you want. But you're not allowed to put on two kettles if you know you're only going to use one. That's important. You're allowed to be mabul b'shurin because it cooks better when there's a very lot. But to make an extra part, that's no good. So it comes out like this. Somebody say, you're allowed to make thick matzahs? The answer is like this. Mitzad thick matzahs, definitely also. Mitzad tircha yisera, that's machlokes b'shama b'salam. Okay, we'll stop here. We're up to Tomim Rabbanon, going into different kinds of doughs for your matzah. Good evening, Ian. How are you doing? You okay?
Very well. You okay?
Yeah, both of them. Nice to see you. Hopefully, early